Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and I'm joined today by the legendary James Stevens Valliant and the great Mark Pellegrino. And we're going to have a debate today between Jim and me. We're going to be debating my claim that Ayn Rand's definition of value is inadequate to make the case for objective morality. I am taking the affirmative, Jim is taking the negative, and Mark has very graciously agreed to be our moderator so that we're not screaming and talking over one another as we are wont to do, at least in our private communications. All right, so Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can explain how we're going to do this.
Yeah, so basically I'm going to moderate. Each candidate here is going to have a 5-minute opening statement, and then they're going to be followed by 5-minute increments of Q&A, I guess. They're going to be answering each other's questions back and forth, or parrying the other's assaults. So, all right, so I'll just basically be a timekeeper here. And Michael, I'm going to assume that since it's your show, you're going to have the first 5 minutes.
We haven't discussed that. That's on Jim. If Jim thinks it's okay for me to go first, I don't want to. We didn't agree yet. I forgot. We should have addressed it, but we were too busy running our collective mouths.
Yes, we were. James, of course, you have guest privileges here. So sorry to presume that, Michael, but he is the guest, and he is. He can say he wants to go first. So
he can.
Do you want, James?
Well, if I go first, it could cut things off at the pass and set the agenda better, I think. But I'm happy to let you go first if you want to.
I'm going to make. How about I make the executive decision?
Well, I'm the prosecutor in the case, and as Jim knows, the prosecutor always goes first.
This is true.
Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to start off with the role of definitions in objectivism. The point of definitions are to distinguish a concept from all other concepts, right? It adds clarity to what you're talking about. It separates what you're talking about from everything else. And importantly, a definition has to be based on that characteristic which differentiates the concept from all other concepts. And if there's more than one characteristic, it has to be fundamental, meaning if a fundamental characteristic is the characteristic upon which most of the other characteristics depend. Now, according to Ayn Rand, the truth or falsehood of all man's conclusions, inferences, thought, and knowledge rests on the truth or falsehood of his definitions. So definitions are vital. So if you look up in the virtuous selfishness I just did, you look up value and you go to definition, or if you look it up in OPAR, that I was looking here, and you look up the definition of value, Ayn Rand defines value as that which one acts to gain and or keep. Now, importantly, I agree with Ayn Rand's theory of morality. I agree with her that values are objective. I agree with her that life is the standard of value. No issue. What I think happens, I think that her theory of morality isn't done justice by her definition of value. The reason being is, if a value is anything I seek to gain and or keep, then it necessarily renders it subjective. A drug addict seeks to gain and or keep heroin, a porn addict with porn. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the different things that a person can can seek to gain and or keep. Now, if you look up, as I was dealing with this problem, I must have spent, I don't know how much time in dictionaries running through various definitions of value, philosophic dictionaries and whatnot. And there's so many different definitions of value. But in this specific case, you're talking about a difference between value, the verb, meaning I value something, because I can value anything I want. Doesn't mean it has value. Value, the noun. Value, the noun, is objective if defined properly. Value, the verb, not necessarily. Now, the reason, she never provides a definition for objective value. Now I see Jimmy, I could be questioned, and you could maybe formulate a situation where you can have a noun value that is that which you seek to gain and or keep. And I'm fine with that, but it still rests on an individual's judgment of value as to what he's seeking to gain and or keep. And he can be wrong. It would still be value in the subjective sense, not the objective sense. The reason this is important is because it leads to confusion and it opens up objectivism to criticism. The evidence that it opens up objectivism to criticism and confusion are the myriad books and articles that have been written that have attacked this aspect of objectivism, including Douglas Daniel and Douglas Rasmussen's The Philosophic Thought of Ayn Rand. I've seen it in numerous other places that I can't immediately recall. I've come across it in numerous debates. Also, importantly, I asked Harry Binswanger during an interview. He actually asked me what I disagreed with Ayn Rand about, and I told him it was the definition of value. He said, well, this is just a preliminary definition. It was never meant to be a definition. Harry Binswanger, who knew Ayn Rand, was the head of the Ayn Rand Institute, says it was a preliminary definition. Leonard Peikoff says, no, it was not a preliminary definition. It was one of two definitions of value that are vital to the case. So you already have two prominent objectivists disagreeing about the nature of this definition. Also today, when I put the question on Facebook and Twitter, the definition of value, I either got that which one acts to seek to gain and or keep, or I got the person responding their own definition, which then I said, no, I want Ayn Rand's definition, to which they responded, that which you seek to gain and or keep. Or I got the definition provided by Leonard Peikoff in his his lecture, The Principle of Two Definitions. This, for me, offers the most evidence that this issue causes confusion, is the fact that Dr. Peikoff felt the need to put forth a lecture and develop a theory about two definitions to clear this issue up, because he said he'd been asked about it for years and he normally just said it was used in two different ways.
Time.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Well, Ayn Rand provides two definitions of value, and with every normative concept, this is necessary. This is necessary with concepts like justice, hero, good, morality. You can go down the list. This is not an optional thing. This is inherent to value, all value concepts that come under value. Ayn Rand needs to describe a factual situation, namely the pursuit of values by any living organism. So all living organisms, whether they're conscious and have volition or not, pursue values. That is what distinguishes living organisms. Life can be seen as value pursuit. So her definition, her first definition, her factual definition, has to include two things that are important. One, people's subjective or wrong or evil or mistaken values, which are still values that they're pursuing. And so if I define it just as the factual definition she first gives, that which one acts to gain and or keep, I'm including all the process, and noun and verb is beside the point. Noun and verb can be done to both definitions, by the way. That's not the essential difference. The difference is a normative definition for her, that is to say, the correct thing that we should, as volitional beings, pursue. It is volition that makes two definitions mandatory for all normative concepts. Two definitions are required for all normative concepts. And I'll explain in just a second, probably next round if I get to it. The second definition she gives is the standard of value. Now, a standard of value is the definition because it tells me, just as you point out, exactly what definitions need to do. It tells me what is, in fact, a value in the normative sense and what is not a value in the normative sense. More than that, it tells me how to prioritize my values when they are values. So immediately, in John Galt's speech, immediately when he says man's life is the standard of value, he says all that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good. In this context, good and value are synonymous. The normative sense of value is the good. And if I have a standard of value, she just announced man's life is the standard of value, then she proceeds to say all that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good. We have her normative definition of value. So there's two kinds of definitions that are needed for every concept. So, for example, in a factual definition of value, I can say, for example, let's take any normative moral concept like hero. There are Christian heroes. There is Christian morality. There is a good Christian or a bad Christian. And yet all of those things are in fact immoral under the objectivist understanding, the objectivist normative definition. And so combining the two senses of value, and they're obviously two distinct senses of value, one which is the factual predicate. Actually, the second one, the normative one, is a subset. It's the same thing in a narrower context, much narrower, but it's, for me, once I have that established, man's life is the standard of value, that subsumes the factual one. So for me, values are the things that are proper to my life. Now, let's take hero. There are Nazi heroes. It's a phenomenon that needs describing. We cannot do without the term hero. Himmler, hero worshipped Hitler. So, but I can then meaningfully say a Nazi hero is a villain. I have to, and people know exactly what I mean. The only paradox there is the contradiction in the Nazi's mind. The fact that human beings have volition requires me to have two definitions of value for any value concept, mind you. And value itself is the most primary. So it has to be the broad one. And we can't do without that either. We have to have a concept that includes subjective values, values that are self-destructive, values that are pre-volitional, what a tree does. I can say meaningfully, for example, that sunlight and water are good for my plant. In that sense, I have to have this factual definition of value. When it comes to moral value, according to objectivism, it's a narrower subcategory, but it is the same exact thing. And so I can say, for example, that Christian hero is a villain, or a Nazi hero is a villain, or a good Christian is a bad person. And now that sounds, as I say, paradoxical, because that is the principle of two definitions. For every normative concept, I have to be able to include that. People, both as a noun and a verb, pursue values when they're all messed up, like Nazis or Christians or Muslims, etc. So I have to, although the second definition subsumes value for me, it doesn't subsume it for the rest of the world. I still need this broader factual definition of value, that which one acts to gain and or keep, including heroin, porn, whatever else you wanted to list, Michael. It's a fact that there are people screwed up out there. So I have to say, that's your hero. That's good according to you. And so I can say a good Christian, people know exactly what I mean. A Nazi hero, people know exactly what I mean. But by objectivist morality, using the standard of man's life, and a standard serves as the essence, it tells me with clarity, like a definition, precisely what is included and what isn't included. And I don't even need to get to other causes, because it absolutely covers the entire field.
This is good. That was time, James. But that poses some very interesting thoughts there, Michael. Factual.
Okay. So first, I happen to agree. I think both definitions, I think you need two definitions. And both are formed on the basis of observation. And life gives rise to both of them, right? It's only living entities that can seek to gain and or keep things. And it's only living entities for which something can be good or bad. Now, importantly, to me anyways, what Jim just described is Leonard Peikoff's theory, the principle of two definitions. Now, objectivism is a closed system. The philosophy of objectivism closed with Ayn Rand's death. Leonard Peikoff, when he gets into, at the very beginning of his lecture, the principle of two definitions, says, this is my theory. I've developed this, not Ayn Rand. So I wouldn't even accept it as objectivism. Doesn't mean it can't be true, just means it's not objectivism. Now, even Dr. Peikoff says in that lecture that you need the same word. It has to be value both times, right? But notice the switch. Yes, Ayn Rand defined the good as that which is good for a rational being. But the term she's using is good. Whether it's synonymous with value is irrelevant according to the theory, because it has to be the same word, value, according to Dr. Peikoff. That is extremely important. But even more important is if you simply define value as that which is valuable to a rational being, you are now defining, you're inserting your conclusion into the definition. You're defining value as life is the standard of value. But what you actually have to do is develop what is a value and then say what gives rise to such a concept, right? Now, when I was on my mad search through dictionary after dictionary and philosophy books for looking for definitions of the word value, I came across any object or quality desirable as a means or end in itself. And importantly, and I'm not wedded to this definition, I'm using it as an example. Importantly, desirable means worth seeking. Now the question that Ayn Rand asks, of value to whom and for what? Worth seeking to whom and for what? Now you have a separate concept, that which is desirable, and you'd say, what makes something desirable or undesirable? And if you want to avoid the infinite regress, you end at life, because it is only life for which something can be desirable or not desirable. For one, it's only living entities that can seek something, right? Not, something inanimate objects can't do it. So nothing can be worth seeking to my cup. And worth, beneficial, good. Now you have a connecting link between a concept and Ayn Rand's standard of value. Again, though, Ayn Rand does say, she doesn't provide it as a definition. She provides it as an argument, or rather a conclusion. That which is good means good for a rational being. It's a conclusion. It's not stated as a definition. And if you look in any of her books and look through the index for definition of value, that's not going to be there. Doing so would insert your conclusion into your definition, pure rationalism, and we're not rationalists. And I'll turn it over to Jim after that.
No, she gives the first one precisely because it is flatly factual. It does not make it valuable by definition. But she gives a second definition. She says it is the standard of value. And when life is the standard of value, that narrows that considerably. She would not include desirable in any of this. She proceeds to explain, I would recommend people read Galt's speech, starting with the section where she says, value is that which one acts to gain and or keep, and proceed all the way through her discussion of what the standard of moral value for human beings is. And so you need it. She makes the precise argument that you're asking for, but a standard is a definition in normative terms. That is to say, I'm no longer just factually describing any old value pursuit. Most people who pursue values do not understand the relationship between values and life. She explains it. She further explains that man is a being of volitional consciousness. We have to choose our code of values. And so being volitional beings, we can mess up. We can, and most people don't even recognize the relationship between the factual definition that she gives. But that factual definition is still indispensable. That is to say, I have to be able to describe a Nazi hero, a good Christian, those sort of things, just because they're facts of reality from observation. Himmler, hero worshipped Hitler. Christians can be evaluated as good or bad Christians. And so the broader definition is one sense of the word. We have a second sense of the word, clearly distinct. And she describes it not as a standard of good, but as a standard of value. And when she says man's life is a standard of value, the very next thing that John Galt says is, all that which is proper for the life of a rational being is the good. All that which destroys it is evil. Now, that is her operative normative definition. It's not noun versus verb. It's factual versus normative. And so this is true for any normative concept. As I say, good is synonymous here with value. They are synonyms, whatever you think. But she called it her standard of value. And so it defines what values are. And standard is exactly what does a definition for us. You started out well. Telling me what the standard of value is defines it. It tells me what it is and what it is not with precision. So if I have life, man's life is the standard of value, and I know that man is a rational volitional being, I can then say all that which is proper for the life of a rational being is the good. Now that considerably narrows it from the factual definition, but it is the definition for Ayn Rand. There's no other definition. for what is the objectivist view of value. Now, I can do it with all these others. I can say the objectivist view of justice, or I can the objectivist view of what a hero is, or the objectivist view, and you pick the normative concept. It could even include epistemology, normative epistemology. David Hume has to be called an epistemologist, even though he says knowledge is impossible. And so I would say David Hume's epistemology is the destruction of epistemology. Just as I could say a Nazi hero is a villain, just as I could say a good Christian is a bad man. Now, those sound paradoxical, but they reveal that there are two senses in which I have to be able to use normative concepts. And it's not like, anyone who's read Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology knows, but there's Ayn Rand believes definitions to be contextual. That is to say, based on my knowledge. So a child might have a primitive definition of human beings or man as the thing that moves around and makes noise. But as their knowledge increases, they sophisticate their definition until they finally reach a proper definition in our full context of knowledge. Man is the rational animal. This is not like that. I retain both. It's not like I'm chucking one in favor of the new definition. I need the old one just as much as I need the new one. Both concepts are still operative, nor is this the kind of equivocation that, say the word trunk. It could mean a big piece of luggage, or it can mean the elephant's nose. No, that's not equivocation. No, and in fact, the second definition, Ayn Rand derives from the first. That is to say, if you really understand value pursuit, that is to say, something that you act to gain and or keep, you'll understand that only living beings do this. In fact, this is the essence of what life is. And so, in effect, what she's arguing is that any other code of values is not pursuing values at all. It's not pursuing life, which is value pursuit. So it's an internal contradiction. So rather than saying, she doesn't do what you say, she doesn't argue that this is true by definition. She argues from the factual, she argues from the factual definition, which describes both non-volitional things and bad things. Bad things, but with this broad factual definition, and she uses that to derive her second definition through a process of complex argumentation. She doesn't build it in by definition. Her normative definition is the climax of a 3-page sequence there in Galt's speech, which tells us about the nature of man being a volitional consciousness, life being in effect value pursuit, etc. And so she ends up with the conclusion of a new definition, a narrower definition, what I regard as value. So the standard of value is the following: all that which is proper to the life of a rational being. Just as, and in broad philosophical concepts, sometimes we need genera as opposed to differentia, if people know what different definitions are. Genera, for certain philosophical concepts, has to be so broad as to be that or that which. So in both definitions, she will say it just like that. That which one acts to gain and or keep is the factual definition of value, and we must retain it in order to explain Nazis and their. No one can escape value pursuit. Value pursuit is inescapable for living beings. So we need the concept, the broad factual definition. That is a valid, perfectly valid, factual definition of value. The second one is her definition of moral value, if you will. That is to say, since we have to choose, and since that is consistent with the nature of life, and only that, anything else, she said, is operating by the standard of death. And most people are oblivious to this connection. So when she gets to the point of saying this is the standard of value, man's life is the standard of value, she then proceeds to say all that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good. That is her, all that is her genera. Just as that is the genera in the factual one.
That's been time. So Michael, he went over by a couple of minutes there. So you have 7 minutes to reply to this.
Okay, so you mean you let him go over by a couple minutes there?
I was actually
Jim, are you paying this guy? What's happening?
I said pause. I said that the time had.
You've got to admit it was insightful.
But then I was waiting for.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So I agree 100%. The first definition is vital. I haven't disagreed with that at all. The question is whether she provides the second definition. So I never said Ayn Rand makes it true by definition. I'm saying Ayn Rand didn't provide a second definition. What I'm saying is, if your claim of her definition would make it true by definition, but you're wrong, that's not her definition. She says, the word value presupposes the question of value, to whom and for what. What you're saying then is that that her claim is, the word life is the standard of value presupposes the question of value, to whom and for what. That's not what she's doing. She has to have a separate idea of value that she can then compare to life and measure it by. You said that, no, this is how she defines moral value. The problem is, moral values are defined in OPAR as they're a subcategory of values defined by two conditions. Moral values are chosen values of a fundamental nature. Nothing about that has anything to do with life as the standard of value. That's your normative broad definition of moral value. That's what the moral values have to meet, that criteria. But again, you can search and search, and you will search in vain. Ayn Rand never provides a second definition of value. She does say the good is that which is good to a rational being. But then what she's doing at the best is she's defining good, not defining value. If Jim says, well, value and good are synonyms, but in the very theory that he relies on, Dr. Peikoff says, no, you can't do that. You need the same word. It has to be the same word. He goes on in some detail about how it has to be the same word. Yes. So the very thing in question, it's vital. I'm not saying that the first definition isn't necessary. I think it's absolutely necessary, especially for me. As somebody who had to undergo dramatic change in my life, I had to juxtapose what I valued with what I should value. And I could only do that by noticing, what have I been seeking to gain and or keep? And then I say, okay, these things are clearly contrary to my best interest, to my life. I need to find values that are good for my life. So you do need the first definition. I've never differed on that. My only claim is that that one definition is not sufficient to provide you with the link that she does provide via argument. She just doesn't include the definition of the term. Nowhere does she say value is that which is good for a rational being. Value is that which is good. Nowhere.
Well,
Michael, you have almost 4 minutes.
I don't need it. Look, Jim is going off on tangents about how you need two definitions for every normative term.
Are you claiming?
I'm fine with that. No, what I'm saying is that all that stuff is irrelevant to the case that I'm making, because I never denied that the first definition isn't necessary. I've never denied that there should be two definitions. The only thing I'm claiming is that Ayn Rand never provided a second definition, and the first definition she provides is inadequate.
But are you claiming then that this is an example of open objectivism?
No, God, no, I'm not.
That means you're saying it closed.
No, I'm saying that. No. I think that the principle of open. I think Jim is relying on an extra objectivist perspective to make his point, because of course the principle of two definitions is not an objectivist position. And if we can argue about that, if you want, I mean, that would add to a separate thing. But Leonard says it at the beginning of the argument that it's not. So, I mean, I take him for his word. Plus, he says it wasn't developed by Ayn Rand. And if objectivism is a closed system, it means it closed with her death. Well,
okay, Jim, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
You gave
not 7.
You gave Leonard. Yes, you gave Leonard.
I'll give it a hard out this time.
It's hard, but I'll do my very best. No, what you just cited was Leonard Peikoff's factual definition of morality, moral value. That is to say, we need, and just like justice is judging people. There's the equivalent, because justice is a subcategory of value, evaluation actually. So you say, my evaluation of other people. That's justice regardless of your moral standard of value. The difference is the standard of value. The only difference between justice or morality, all these terms need two definitions. And I think Ayn Rand understood that. And I think Dr. Peikoff understood just exactly that, because Ayn Rand does use all of these concepts in two different senses. There's Christian morality. Now, to include Christian morality in your concept of morality, you have to be factual, just as Ayn Rand was in her first definition of value. But definitions don't come out with a little flag that say, here's my definition. A standard of value does exactly what a definition does. It precisely tells me what is and is not included in the thing. More than that, it tells me how to prioritize values within the category of things that are good. And value and good are synonyms. I'm sorry, Michael. If you can't see that, you'll never see that this is, because right, in the same breath that she says man's life is the standard of value, she then explicates that very statement, that man's life is the standard of value. All that which is proper to the life of a rational being, that does insert her view of morality, her distinct and unique view of morality. And I can do that with every normative concept. Morality, justice, you name it, hero, they all must have two definitions. They must, perforce. Otherwise, I'm missing description of what's really going on in reality. I still have to describe a Nazi or a Christian's values. And it's meaningful to talk about their values. In another sense, they're not values at all. They're actually anti-values. They're actually villains. They're actually unjust. They're actually vices. They're actually evil. And so if I believe that some good people are pursuing as a good something that's evil, I have to make that exact distinction. So later in Galt's speech, and I do urge people to read that entire continuum, and you won't get a little flag that says this is a definition for most of these things. You just infer it. But man's life is the standard of value. And thus, all that which is proper to the life, all that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good. All that which destroys it is the evil. Now, that tells you with precision and definitional precision exactly Ayn Rand's specific definition of objectivist conception of value. Now, I could add a little modifier before each of these, but I think it takes more than one modifier. That's why I think we need two definitions of the same exact term. That because of volition. Human volition, free will, requires us to have two definitions for every normative concept. Ayn Rand operates as if there are two definitions for every normative concept. And so she could quite sensibly tell you and say, and you would know what she meant when she said that Nazi heroes are villains.
Is that, are you actually finished, Jim?
Ta-da.
That is 1 minute and 20 seconds ahead of schedule. Thank you. I didn't have to do any embarrassing interruptions.
Okay, so
Just got, now, Michael, you're prepared to come back with your 5
yeah,
minutes?
I am, because again, we've gone over this idea that we need two definitions, which again is something that I've never disagreed with. My only disagreement is that she provides the second definition. No, I also never denied that value and good are synonyms. What I said was that according to Dr. Peikoff and the theory that Jim is relying on to make his case, according to Dr. Peikoff, you have to use the same word. You can't rely on synonyms. So you couldn't rely on the definition of good. So even if she defined good, that wouldn't satisfy the theory Jim is using. Also, importantly, the only way you can know if two words are synonyms is if you define both of them. So if she even if she defines good, which I don't hold that as a definition, because it's a conclusion that she arrives at. But even let's say, granted, that's the definition. You still haven't defined value, which you would need to do in order to say that the two words are synonyms. Now, I personally am completely out of things to say on this topic, unless Jim has something to add. But I will say this: whether you think that I'm right or I'm wrong, read Galt's speech. And if you conclude I'm wrong, I'm fine with concluding I'm wrong. Read Galt's speech. Read the whole book. Read everything that Jim and I have talked about here tonight. Virtuous Selfishness, OPAR, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. Read it all. And then go listen to Dr. Peikoff's lecture on the principle of two definitions. And even better, tune into Jim's course that he's given right now for the Ayn Rand Center UK on the unity of epistemology and ethics. Because the bottom line is this. This, to me, it is an important debate, and I don't want to minimize it. But of far more importance is the moral conclusions that we're all arriving at. And the three of us, I think, would all agree. And you two, by the way, are embodiments of the ethics that we're talking about. You're both very great friends of mine and very great people. So, like, just so everybody knows, Jim and I, we could go hard at each other. And believe me, this isn't the end of this debate. We will be arguing about it for years to come. And I'm fine with that. Because
Why you have turned my head with your flattery, son.
Because ultimately our pursuit is of truth, and that's what matters.
There's this great joke in what is the Woody Allen movie Love and Death, where Diane Keaton asks the character that Woody Allen is playing, are you scared of death? Or I think Woody Allen, asks Diane Keaton, are you scared of death, Sonia? And her character. And Sonia replies, scared isn't the right word. I'm frightened of it. To which he responds, interesting distinction. And I would have the same response with the term good. I cannot imagine the term good, except because it too needs two definitions, but in both senses, it is a synonym of value. In both senses, it is a synonym of value. Good is, I can say something is good for the plant, and or bad for the plant. I'm saying it's a value for the plant, in the same exact sense that Ayn Rand is with her factual definition. If I say this is good for man, now I'm narrowing in on the needs of a volitional being and saying that life is the standard of value. She said it's the standard of value. If life is the standard of value, that tells me with precision what is and is not a value in this second sense. And she then proceeds to use good and evil to make that contrasted. And again, it's that which sort of description. So again, it has the same kind of flag that the first definition had to it. All that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good. All that which destroys it is the evil. To my way of reading, in my simple-minded little way, I equate good and value, and they both require the same two definitions, as I'll do all normative concepts. And good and value are the broadest of all of them. And so the standard of value that we bring to bear is the definitional difference between, say, a factual definition of morality, which is what you quoted from Leonard's book, by the way, versus the normative one. Morality has to be defined by the standard of life if you're talking about the objectivist, or we might say objective morality. But I'd need all kinds of modifiers for value. I need objective, human, rational. So that, you have to have the same term. But English is a lovely thing. It's got multiple words for the same concept. And in this context, good and value are, to my way of thinking, identical. Value. Good is a value, either in the factual sense, which applies to animals and to evil people, what they think is good. But the statement that you quoted that I really, now twice, that I really wanted to zero in on, when Ayn Rand in the Objectivist Ethics says, value is a concept that presupposes an answer to the question of value to whom and for what she's asserting there is that however you use this concept value, you're deploying a standard of value. And the essential difference is that standard of value of good to whom and for what. And so good, value, same thing. Good in objectivist lights is good because it is good for life. And for man, that means good for my nature as a rational being. They're synonymous. But in any case, you're right. It seems to me that we agree about the substance of everything, and that really what this is a linguistic argument. Is this a definition, strictly speaking, or is this the proper definition? And if a lexicographer were here, or philologist were here or something, and came in and said, well, wait, you know what the proper definition would require, that would be a philosophically uninteresting topic to me. I have an operative definition when I have the standard of value for the second normative use, the second normative sense of value or good, which I do regard as synonyms. The standard of value. It not only tells me what is
just
good.
By the way, I have stopped keeping time because Michael.
Oh, come on.
Okay. Wait, look.
If you do that, he'll talk until midnight.
I'll be done in just 1 more. Take my money from Jim later on.
Let me tell you. I got a funny story. Story. But first, I want to say this: if Jim were right, then to say, if you're defining value, you would say life is the standard of value. The word value meaning life is the standard of value.
No.
So life is the standard of, life is the standard of, you go on to an infinite chain. But Jim, we've beat this thing to death. If you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Wait a minute here. People could volitionally choose something else, not realizing the relationship between life and value. So
yes,
when I add
I agree.
life is the standard of value, I'm telling you precisely what my values are. Better than any definition I can think of. But on the other hand,
but what is the definition of value?
I'm not.
Give me the second definition.
Necessity at all.
What's the second definition of value?
All that which is proper to the life of a rational being.
Okay. And Ayn Rand never provides that as a definition of value.
She says, right on the heels in Galt's speech, she says, man's life is the standard of value. She does.
I agree.
The very next sentence is, all that which is proper to the life of a rational being is.
She does. Okay.
That is her normative definition.
Can I tell you my story? Can I tell my funny story?
We spent 40 minutes just to come back round to the circle to agree.
Yeah, well, it's what we disagree on. People have to judge for themselves. So here's the funny story. One night, Jim and I are on the phone. We're doing the what the hell is it called? The FaceTime. Right? My phone froze. Right. So I had to get to bed, but I couldn't tell Jim I got to go to bed. So Jim is talking and talking. I'm like, oh no. And he's telling me a story. And Jim's stories are interesting. Listen, some people talk and they bore you, not Jim. But at the end of this, Jim says, I can still see him. He doesn't know it. He says, oh Lord, have I done it again? Jim Valliant, you are a prince among men, sir.
Thank you. You are. You just made it. You gave me a huge compliment. Let me return it, sir. I have done some good things, and I am a good man, and I know it. But I have not overcome what you have overcome, sir. To build from scratch, or not just scratch, not just from the floor, but from a very negative and hostile context. I myself have, as a prosecutor of almost 18 years, read thousands upon thousands of forensic psych reports. And if you had told me about your childhood, I would have told you that it would take a superhuman to overcome that and become a man of character. And so, sir, let me just say that compared to me, you have overcome so much that to me, you are a hero. And I will, whatever the correct normative definition of value might be, let me just say that you are a hero based on the standard of man's life.
Thank you very much.
I want to pile on, not just because it's your show, Michael, but you are a completely self-made man, and that is one of the highest compliments I could pay anybody. So even though I think Jim got the better view in this debate, that's just my opinion.
Oh, come on, you can't. You're the moderator. You're not there to judge.
I judged. I'm here to judge.
The money's in the mail, Mark.
Yeah, first you're giving him extra time, and now you're giving him the win.
Hey,
What's
I did say time's up at 5 minutes. It just didn't seem to register.
Well, we're going to check the tape. Mark, before we go, give us an advertisement for our show and for the party.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, guys, thanks for tuning into the Rational Egoist and watching this awesome debate. I hope it was as edifying to you as it was for me. Now tune in every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern time for the Capitalist Corner, and watch Michael and I discuss all the current events from a capitalist perspective. And please go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org and donate and or join. Become a member of the Capitalist Party. Be the wave of the future, folks. Let's be the new sons and daughters of liberty that take over the country, take it away from the statists, and put it back on its rational course. It's a rational egoistic course again. Thanks for the plug, Michael.
Oh, thank you. And thank you both for doing this. I really appreciate it. And for now,
I haven't missed a single episode. I think just one part of one episode because I had to go take my mother to a doctor on Friday. But
you still didn't miss. You were still calling in. You were texting in.
When I got to the waiting room, I was still plugging in. That's why I say half an episode. But no, you guys have got a great podcast. You two are dynamic together. I highly recommend it, people. Check it out. Capitalist Corner.
Thanks so much, Jim. Thanks, Mark. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Till next time.